Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Bug Fables, the Everlasting Sapling. This is my first ever limited run game. For those of you who are not familiar, there's a company out there that is making physical versions of games that would otherwise only be available on digital. And because I love physical versions of games so much, I like to have them on my shelf, I like to look at them, I like to have the cartridge with me and that feeling of ownership. And so I'm very much excited to finally be able to pre-order and receive my first limited run game. This took a long time to come in. It was a long time coming. I pre-ordered this, I want to say about 7 months ago. And so I'm excited to finally have it and finally play through it and give my casual review for it. This game is inspired heavily by the original Paper Mario games. It even has that same papery 2D aesthetic to it. And the combat is very similar as well. If you ever played the two original Paper Mario games or the Mario and Luigi series, you are familiar with this combat. The Paper Mario series has since derived from this original turn-based style, but unlike most traditional turn-based combat, this one requires a little bit more button input. It's unlike Final Fantasy where I attack, then you attack, then I attack, then you attack. It still has that, but it requires a little more input where, let's say I'm on defense and the enemy is about to strike. He's about to do his attack on my character. I can press the defense button in order to reduce some of that damage taken. The timing to get this defense off is very difficult, especially if you are playing against a new enemy that you are unfamiliar with their attack patterns. But once you do finally have this mastered, you can reduce the damage taken quite significantly. So it's important to be on the defense here. Now, there are also certain inputs required when you are attacking an enemy. Your party consists of 3 different characters that all have different inputs. That's not including the special attacks, but we'll get into all the nitty-gritty in just a second. It just requires you to do certain things. So we have our beetle named Kabu, and his works kind of like the traditional Mario hammer attack, where you hold the down analog stick until it lights up, and then you let go of the analog stick, and that's how you do bonus damage there. You have V, the bee with a boomerang, and it'll be this little slider cursor, and if you press A in the green area, then you'll do that bonus damage. And then you have Leaf. He is kind of like your mage moth character. You have to input the correct button indicated, and it's varied between 3 different buttons. So if you're pulling off all of these inputs correctly, you are going to maximize your damage output and minimize your damage input. But there's a lot more to this combat than that, especially if you're comparing it to the original Paper Mario games. There are 3 different characters, unlike the 2 in the Paper Mario games, and you can swap the position that these characters are in, so there's a little more strategy there as well. The character in front of the row is going to get attacked more, but he'll get a little bonus damage. You can also choose to relay a character's turn in order to give another character a second attack. However, each additional attack that they do in a turn is going to do less damage. You're going to have less of a return on the damage. So let's say you are playing against a flying enemy. The only character whose basic attack can damage a flying enemy is V, the bee with her boomerang. If V's already done her turn and Kabu has 1 turn left, but he can't attack this flying enemy, you can choose to give that turn to V to do an additional attack, but it's going to do less damage. It's going to do 1 less damage. There's a lot more to this, and I don't feel like it's necessary to go into the nitty-gritty of all of the combat. And while it can be complex, I feel like the information in this game, as far as even the lore, the combat, all of it is just so digestible and easy to understand. It's not this huge, complex RPG. It's kind of like one of those easy to pick up, difficult to master systems, especially when you take into consideration these turn-based actions that you need to do. And part of this is due to its low number system. Now, if you've ever played a traditional RPG like a Final Fantasy, how it typically goes is at the beginning of the game, you will have maybe like 20 hit points, and enemies will only do 2 hit points, you only do 2 or 3 hit points. But as you grow, as you level up, your stats will move up. This is similar to like a Pokemon game. The numbers get bigger significantly. In the end game, 2 HP is going to be like nothing to you compared to the beginning of the game where these attacks would actually be a little more significant. In this game, it's a little different. You grow your character's stats a little differently, and it's kind of interesting because 5 damage at the beginning of the game is a ton of damage. 5 damage at the end of the game is still quite a lot of damage. So the damage is always easy to understand and digestible. Sometimes I feel like when you play other RPG games, the damage can go into the thousands, and suddenly the numbers flying above characters' heads becomes a little insignificant because of how much the numbers grow. But in this game, it is always simple, and at the end of the game, each one of my characters only had 13 hit points, and that's N-level hit points. So now you may be wondering, how do I get any stronger? If 5 damage at the end of the game is still a lot of damage, how do I feel stronger? Because RPGs are all about growing as a character, boosting up your stats, doing all of this customization to make your character your own. And so let me get into the leveling system here a bit. Every time you level up, you are able to choose one of 3 things. You can give each of your characters 1 extra HP, and obviously I did not really do that most of the time. You can give your characters team points, and team points are used to do special abilities, special strong abilities, and this is similar to something like a mana system to use your spells. So you can give yourself 3 team points, or you can give yourself 3 medal points. And medals, I think, are the meat and potatoes of really customizing your character and growing them in terms of stats, where if you've ever played the original Paper Mario games, this comes in the form of badges. And medals are pretty much the same thing as badges in the original Paper Mario games, but they all have different varying effects, and they all require different amount of badge points, determining on how useful the medals are. So let's say 3 badge points will give your character an extra 2 hit points, and you can choose to equip that specific badge on any 3 of your characters. But they come in other varying forms of risks and rewards. Like 1 badge will be 5 badge points, so quite a lot of badge points, but it will give your character an extra damage for their basic attacks and their team abilities. However, this will lower the defense by 1, so it's kind of like a high risk, high reward, and in this case, you'd want to give that to your character in the back that is less likely to get targeted. Typically, you want to have Kabu in the very first position of your team because he's more of your tanky character. He's supposed to be taking all of your hits, so maybe you want to give him a little bit more of a defense, so you want to give him a badge that gives him +1 in defense. This will also be a significant amount of badge points. So every time I leveled up, I felt like it was worth it to go mostly into the badge points because you can give your character additional HP and team points through these medals. So it just gave me a lot more freedom in terms of customization, and by the end of the game, I was definitely happy with my build, but I felt like there was a ton of potential possibilities with these medals in order to create the perfect team that was suitable for me. As you play through the game, you can acquire these medals through varying ways. Some of them are hidden, some of them you can buy with this currency. Instead of coins, the currency here are blueberries, which I thought was a nice touch. So you can buy medals, you can find them, and the other way you can get them is through quests. So on top of the additional main quests that you will be playing through in pursuit of this Everlasting Sapling, you can also do these side quests to help out characters throughout Bulgaria. That's the name of the land that you are playing through. And there are a ton of side quests, especially if you just want to be in this world, you want to play more of this game. It is a very long game. By the end of the game, I had 33 hours total, which is typically longer than I like to play games, but I never felt like I was necessarily wasting time because I felt like these rewards were definitely worth it in terms of exploring and helping out the bugs doing these side quests. And I guess that will lead me into the whole plot of this game that I just only briefly touched on. The plot of this game takes place in Bulgaria, and there are different societies based on what type of bug they are. So this is all from a bug's view. Everything is big. So you see these relics from humans, like straws and cups and cardboard boxes, and the bugs have kind of used these resources in order to create towns and cities and just kind of built up these societies. Now, these societies are generally split up in terms of what species of bugs you are. So you are starting out in the ant kingdom. This is the biggest kingdom. There's a whole castle here, and it's very reminiscent of a typical medieval knights kind of aesthetic. And our 3 characters are basically recruited by the ant queen in terms of searching for the Everlasting Sapling. Typically, these groups are split up into 2, and they are known as explorer groups, and these explorer groups are sent out on command of the queen totally in pursuit of this everlasting sapling. For some reason, this Ant Queen just really wants this everlasting sapling. It is a relic of immense power, and we have no idea where it is. So we are out to find relics and hints on where to get this everlasting sapling. Our group just gets a little bit of an exception because we get 3 party members instead of 2, and each of these party members has their own, obviously like their own roles. I mentioned like a mage, a boomerang, and then kind of like this tank, but they all have their own unique personalities, and they're all very lovable in their own unique way. Like Kabu, he's very stout and noble and almost to an annoying fault, where he is just out to help the citizen. He's very knightly. And then you have this mysterious moth called Leaf, and he's kind of a recluse, kind of a loner, but he has a very mysterious past, kind of that cliche amnesia, no idea what my past history is. I only woke up like this. And then you have V, that she's a very headstrong but lovable bee who's all about getting rewards. I wouldn't call her selfish, but she's just definitely headstrong, and her Kabu and her kind of roll eyes at each other. They're opposing personalities, but they all really come to grow as characters and help each other out, and you can definitely feel this bond growing between them from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. There is a ton of character growth here. I've come to love and know about each and every one of these characters. I just really like to see them grow as a team, you know? It's kind of touching because in a long RPG game like this, you want to see that character growth, and I think it certainly delivers here for each of these characters. Now, that's not all there is to unpack in this game. There's this lore and this kind of political system between all of the different bug races. So I mentioned the Ant Kingdom, very stout and noble, very militaristic. But then you also have these different clans. So you have the bees, and they are very industrial, and you kind of go through this honey factory in their hive. And then you have these wasps, and they are very recluse and antagonistic. And then you uncover lore about this ancient race of the roaches who no one has seen in thousands of years. We don't know anything about these roaches, but they've left behind all of this technological advancement and relics. So they're kind of the ones all behind the everlasting sapling, that they're the ones who leave the hints on where to go and what to do. So there's a lot to unpack here, just tons of lore. You can even go into this library in the Ant Kingdom and read all about these political systems and this lore. And while there is a ton of it, just like the combat system, I feel like the lore itself was digestible and enjoyable, easy to understand, and definitely intriguing. I wanted to know more about how all of these societies fit together in Bulgaria. And you certainly explore through all of these different terrains while you are trying to find this everlasting sapling, so you get to know about each of these cultures and environments. There's a deserty area, there's a ice area, there's a kind of like this fog, misty, mysterious area. There's a ton of places and things to explore and uncover. I mean, you don't play 33 hours of a game without a little bit of intrigue in terms of the combat and the lore and the world. And as you are playing through these games, you are unlocking abilities through quests, and through the character growth between our characters, certain story elements will happen which will unlock new powers within our own teammates, which will also reflect in exploration and in combat. I was always engaged with what was going on. It always had ways of tempting me to progress further into the game. So let me just start with the hard mode. At the beginning of this game, you're given a medal, and it requires 0 medal points to use, and it basically toggles on and off this hard mode. You are free to unequip it whenever you want. Now, typically, I steer well away from hard mode. I don't really see the point of hard mode. I don't like to be challenged in that unfair way. I love to play on just the normal difficulty that the developers have intended for me to play on. But this hard mode medal offers additional rewards. That's how you get me to play hard mode. It will give you more of this currency, more of these berries. It will give you more XP, and every time you beat a significant boss while you have this hard mode medal equipped, you will get an additional medal that you otherwise wouldn't be able to obtain. So when you have this incentive, I feel like it really encourages you to play on this hard mode if you think you can handle it. it, and then you can just take it off when you finally can't, and that's what I did. I want to say I played about a fourth of this game with this hard metal on, and eventually I kind of hit this wall where I had to take it off, but it's just kind of interesting to me that it has this incentive for me to have it equipped where otherwise I would steer clear away from a hard mode. Now, I did figure once I took off this hard mode, this game would be easy street. I felt like every time I was playing through, I was like, oh, it's only this difficult because I have this hard metal on. I still feel like this game is rather difficult. The hard mode metal only ramps up the difficulty a little bit, and it still provides quite a challenge. And don't even think like you can grind up and over-level your character because of how this leveling system works. I felt like they were a little stingy with XP in terms of grinding, where if you're encountering lower level enemies, they're not going to give you any experience at all. Well, okay, so they give you 1 experience point, but it takes more than 100 experience points to level up. So grinding low level enemies is no longer really an option if you're having trouble with a certain part. The only ones who grant XP are ones who are on par with your level. It always felt difficult to me. Once I took off the hard mode metal, it always felt difficult and challenging to me, but the combat never felt impossible. It always felt like I could potentially overcome this battle. If you do get a game over from a battle, don't worry about it. This game is very lenient with it. It doesn't take you back to wherever you last saved. It'll say, okay, do you want to retry this battle? Do you want to customize your party in terms of medals and then retry this battle? Or do you want to go back to your last save? So every time you are stuck on a difficult boss, you could just retry over and over again. And I love that it has this option to customize your build out before you go back into this battle. Like, okay, this medal build out didn't work, but let me try out this one now that I know more what this boss is all about. It was very enjoyable, and I'm glad I didn't have to go back to these save crystals and backtrack over and over again every time I would die at one of these more difficult boss fights. Now, if you play through a boss without using this hard metal, don't feel like you missed out on acquiring some of these unlockable medals that you otherwise want to get, because it is so generous in terms of replayability, where you have the option to re-battle any of these bosses that you want, and you can battle them using this hard mode metal in order to check, kind of like test your steel, you know, or try to unlock additional things. There are just so many options and so much to unpack here, so I'm trying to be cohesive about it, but I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place because I just am so excited about this game, and there's just so much to talk about. Now, I did hit a level cap near the end of the game, and I'm actually pretty disappointed that there is a level cap because I want to equip all of the medals that I possibly can, but you are only able to level up 40 times before it completely halts your progress. So once you hit that point, it's kind of useless in terms of battling enemies unless you need to ramp up on your currency. And that's another thing I want to get into, are these blueberry currencies. Now, normally in normal games you have like a bank that you can store your currency at, but if you don't lose your currency when you die, there's not really much incentive to store your currency in a bank. However, just like the hard mode metal, this also has incentive where it will give you interest based on how much of these blueberries you have stored in the bank and how long you've been playing. So at the beginning, you acquire 2% interest every half an hour in your bank, and then you eventually unlock this ability to get 4% of your currency in this bank. And I took full advantage of this. I would store all my berries in this bank and get 4% interest in it. I wish my real life bank offered that much when I put my money in my savings, because it never feels like you're wasting time in that way, because every half an hour you're acquiring 4% of your blueberries in this bank. However, because I took full advantage of this at the beginning of the game, I felt like I had way too much cash at the end, and I really wish that there were some expensive things for me to spend all my money on. I didn't feel like it was worth it to really put all my blueberries in the bank, because I had a ton at the end of the game with nothing to spend it on. I had bought in all of the badges that I potentially could, and then after that you only have really like healing items and resurrection items to spend your money on afterwards. So I just wish like there was something else I could spend my money on in order to make it feel like it was worth it to save up all of my blueberries at the beginning of the game, because that also made the first half of my game a little more difficult than it needed to be. Now, there's also other stuff to unpack besides the main game and the side quests and storing blueberries. There are also achievements that you can go for if you are all about 100% completing these kinds of things. And it also gives you a sense of accomplishment when you do hit these certain thresholds. There's a cooking system where you can cook 2 different ingredients together to create a whole new item. There's even a whole card game that you play through that I beat all the way. I play through this card game. I loved it, where every time you encounter a new enemy, you have the option to spy on them. And this will tell you its hit points, a little something about it, and it'll also give you a card of this enemy to use in this whole card building game. Eventually, you unlock an arcade, which gives you these 2 other little games. One is like a Flappy Bird clone. One is like this dungeon crawler game. So it's a little something extra that you can do there. You can interact with all of these characters and objects, and there's just so much dialogue in this game where I talked about that spy system a second ago. Each of your characters has something different to say about every single enemy. Anytime you use spy using Kabu, he'll say something different than if you use the spy ability using Leaf. Now, this also works in the exterior world, like outside of combat, where every time you come across a new character, every time you come across a statue, a point of interest, you can press the minus button and your character will say a little something about every single one of these objects. So there's just so much of lore and unpacking of this game. It's insane the amount of dialogue and detail that they put here. I really enjoy the humor and the banter of this game as well when you're progressing through the main game. Just hearing your 3 characters interact with each other, how Leaf and Kabu kind of roll their eyes whenever V demands a reward. Just the humor here, probably not as good as the Paper Mario games, I would say, but it's still very entertaining and enjoyable. The aesthetic is fun, how they go for that whole papery detail. This is nothing new though. This is something that you see all the time in the Paper Mario series. The music itself is so light and bubbly and fun. Even near the end of the game when things start getting scary, the music still, it's scary, but it's still bubbly in a way. So I definitely enjoyed the music. And there's this one bug that you can encounter in all of the cities and towns and societies, and you can buy the music from her. So you can re-listen to any of these songs if you wish. She will play them for you for a small price to unlock each song. I think it's like 2 blueberries. It is just an enjoyable game to be in, an enjoyable world to soak up. The music, the aesthetic, the lore, everything. It's all so well done in my opinion. And what's even more surprising to me about this game is it was majorly made by only 2 people, and the fact that they just have this huge game for you to play through, it's so impressive. If my babbling isn't coherent enough, I'm just going to simplify it in saying, obviously, this game is a 5 out of 5 game. And if you're a fan of the original Paper Mario games, I think you will absolutely love this game. Probably one of the best Paper Mario-esque games I've ever played. I guess I'm just gonna say I'm impressed by it. You know, I had fun and I really do recommend it. Well, guys, that's it for me. Thanks for listening to me ramble about Bug Fables, the Everlasting Sapling. Let me know if you have any questions about it, and I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. That's it for me, though. I'll talk to you later. Bye!